My name is Patricia Kaziro. I'm the Director of Impact Business School. Today I'm talking to Ralph Fallows, the Strategic Partnerships Manager at Ability Works Australia. Rafe is a dedicated community builder with a career spanning multiple geographies, industries, and sectors. From corporate roles with Cadbury Schweppes, Kraft, and Mondelez International, to consulting with organisations including Deloitte, Australia Post, and Monash University. He now brings that commercial rigour and strategic thinking to the social enterprise sector, driven by a deep rooted belief in community, social purpose, and the power of meaningful employment to transform lives. Ability Works Australia is an award winning non-profit based in Kew, Victoria, committed to purpose through employment. They operate 3 business units: inclusion consulting and training, customised employment, and supported employment, delivering manufacturing, digital services, logistics, and more for governments, business, and non-profit. So, welcome, Rafe.
Yeah,
Great to
thanks,
have you
Patricia.
here.
What a
Yeah,
great pitch.
yeah. Well, I'd love to deep dive into a little bit of the experience behind the headline. So, if you can perhaps start by telling us a little bit about Ability Works Australia. What does
Yeah,
the organisation stand for? Who do you exist to serve? And why does that mission matter now?
no, for sure. 63 years old, Ability Works, as you mentioned, based up in Kew in the eastern suburbs of Victoria. Originally as part of the Thomas Embling Rehabilitation Hospital. So we're still in the grounds of the Thomas Embling, which is the rehab facility of the Austin Hospital, but we're a separate not-for-profit and certified and verified social enterprise. Some years ago, whilst it was part of the occupational therapy rehabilitation for patients with either spinal injuries or acquired brain injuries, we've now become a certified and verified social enterprise that exists predominantly to provide people with employment opportunities, either directly with us or indirectly with some of the clients that we work with.
That's a very interesting history. And so, in terms of the evolution into what the organisation's doing now, when we do talk about human rights in a business context, what does that actually look like through the lens of what Ability Works does day to day?
I would say that it's an essential human right that individuals have the right to work.
Mm,
And a lot of the individuals that we work with face barriers to working or barriers to employment. In the case of Ability Works, we generally work with people with intellectual disabilities, and that can bring with it a number of different barriers to entering the workforce. And Ability Works provides, not unique, because there are other organizations like us,
mm.
but presents a great opportunity for people to work directly with us or for us to help them into employment with other organizations where they may need a bit more assistance from an accessibility perspective. But it just fulfills that fundamental need or human right for the opportunity to work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think for people who are listening in and curious about what might be different in terms of employment of people with disability, when you talk about intellectual disability, how might that play out or seem different?
Um, I would say by and large, people with intellectual disability just need a little bit more support. So we have a model within our supported employment model
Mm.
whereby every 3 employees are supervised by one individual. So we have a 3-to-1 ratio. That doesn't mean that every individual has a 3-to-1 ratio. It just means on average that some people might need one-on-one support to be able to work alongside their intellectual disability. Some may need 20 on one support, but on average, as I mentioned, our people are supported on a ratio of 3-to-1. And sometimes they need a bit more emotional support or maybe a bit of practical or physical support. We have a number of people with visual impairment, so they might need some actual physical support to find their way around. And we also have a number of individuals with extra emotional support. So, yeah, I think the individuals we work with just need a little bit more than perhaps you or I do. But that's not to say that you or I don't need supports ourselves. We all have access requirements, and
Yes,
our people have a little bit more in certain areas.
that's very insightful. So thank you for sharing that. And you talked about before employment being one of the most powerful ways to support human rights um, by providing these economic and purposeful employment opportunities. So, how do you make the case to partner organisations that employing people with disability isn't just about good ethics, but it's also about good business?
I think one of the things I continue to learn and understand is that there is a skills shortage, and there is a shortage of people able to do work. Um, and we have a number of individuals who are looking for work, and have the skills required to do the work, but have a barrier in between. So the organizations ourselves, we drop the barriers to those individuals because we know specifically what it is required to work with people, particularly with intellectual disabilities. But we also help organizations to drop their barriers, whether that means making their website more accessible so that people can navigate their website, whether that means preparing them for the interview, whether that means helping them to navigate the public transport requirements of getting to work on time, but also helping the employer to understand the modifications, if any, that are
Mm,
required to work with those individuals, because there's a skill shortage. And just because you have an intellectual disability doesn't mean that you have a skill, or that doesn't mean that you don't have a
don't
skill.
have a skill. Yeah.
We have many individuals who are tertiary educated. We have many individuals who are got trades behind them. We've got many individuals with many different skills,
Mm,
and they have an intellectual disability. So at Ability Works,
yes.
pardon the pun,
Yeah.
it's about trying to focus on the ability the individual has to plug the employment gap, create gainful, meaningful employment for the individual, but also solve a problem in business in getting the work done.
Fascinating. And you might also be able to illuminate a little bit around what is the kind of common experience that people with disabilities may be facing when they do go to interview or they start employment, given that, to your point, they have so much ability, same as anybody. What are the actual stumbling blocks that they may find when they do enter a workforce that hasn't been trained or isn't aware of making the modifications that you mentioned?
I don't think it's unique to people with disability, but we
Mm,
all have an unconscious bias.
yeah,
Whatever reason, our life experience to date has built this bias within us that we might not necessarily, well, we're not conscious of it, hence the phrase unconscious
unconscious. Yeah.
bias.
Mm,
So I think the best thing to do is just to not assume. It's in our DNA, in our makeup, to make assumptions, to make judgments, to keep us safe. If
yes.
we go back to the Stone Ages, it's about keeping us safe. But those unconscious biases stand in the way and create barriers. And very broadly, when we talk about people with disabilities, the picture that's conjured up is somebody in a wheelchair. Now,
Yes.
disabilities come in many different forms, but the unconscious bias tends to come up to say, oh, but we're on the fourth level and we don't have a lift and we only have stairs. That tends to be the first bias that shows itself.
Yeah.
And the point being that intellectual disabilities come in many different forms. As I mentioned earlier on, I think we all have access requirements, not just people with disabilities. So it's about trying to get and overcome those unconscious biases.
That's insightful. And I think in addition to the unconscious bias, like maybe you could talk us through some of the other blind spots that organizations might have. So if it's not just the physical space in the processes of hiring, retaining team members, what else might come up other than that kind of blind spot around, oh, we can't modify, the stairway, or how do we do this through the bias that you're talking about?
Well, the business and government um, services or infrastructures are very digital, and
Yes.
not everybody has access to digital. My
Okay.
own recent recruitment experience within a disability provider had a number of digital requirements to it. And those, whilst they can be, dare I say, a little bit intimidating for me, I can only imagine people who
Mm.
aren't very familiar with digital formats, how intimidating that can be for them. One of the things that we do at Ability Works is that we work with a number of individuals with lived experience to test websites for their accessibility. Uh,
Brilliant.
and as a disability service provider, it's very important that we have an accessible website that considers colors and noise and placement within our website to make sure it's able to be accessed. So it goes beyond making sure there's a ramp out the front to
Yeah.
accommodate somebody in a wheelchair. There are many different aspects, from the web to the lighting to the quiet zone to all sorts of things. I myself had a scare last year, a cancer scare last year with a melanoma. I
Yes.
can't be in an outdoor environment for too long without shade. I have an accessibility requirement, and it doesn't necessarily line up with a disability.
No.
I have to consider, and organisations or people organising events have to consider my access requirements of not being a pale Scotsman who's a bit prone to sunburn.
Yeah.
Not providing shade is an accessibility problem for me. Um, so it's
And
very
I'm curious if you don't mind me asking, just to dive a little deeper into that storyline, how was your workplace able to accommodate that need or preference of yours?
I actually didn't talk about it. I was recounting this story the other day where I didn't raise it in my interview, but I had anxiety leading into my first day as to where my desk was going to be. Was it going to be
Sure.
in front of a window? Did that
Yeah.
mean sun was going to come in through the window?
Yeah.
I also need to move a little bit on a
Mm.
separate issue. So I
Sure.
needed a sit-stand desk, but they're not the sort of things that I felt comfortable raising at the interview process because, dare I
Yeah.
say, I was keen to get the job. And then I was able to accommodate that in the workplace and felt comfortable enough to have the conversation when I was in employment. But I
Yeah.
can imagine that's a very common circumstance for many individuals, let alone
Yeah.
those facing extra barriers to employment, as to when do you raise that? When do
Yeah.
you raise the needs that you have with an employer? You don't want to be seen as difficult or hard to manage or
Yeah.
complicated. So again, that's that facing those barriers to not just getting the job, but actually settling into the job.
I think you're raising such an important point here, and I can relate from my own experiences many years ago, where I found myself in a situation that was a different scenario, but what we're talking about here is a communication piece and a toxic environment where for someone like me who's actually quite articulate and able to communicate well and express myself, I was very much steamrolled in this situation. And I mentioned that because something that always stuck with me was, what if you didn't have English as a first language? What if you were not midlife, mid career, and couldn't advocate for yourself? What if you weren't from Sydney and didn't have that confidence, of being a city a city person? So um, things like that have always stuck with me when we're talking about accessibility and that need to advocate for yourself or express what your needs are. And I guess that leads into my next question, which would be, what do you think it takes for an organisation to move from good intentions to inclusion in a real organisation with a real organisational approach, so that it's also not just left to the individual to advocate for themselves or have the confidence to speak up,
Mm.
given that it's challenging for most of us?
I would say that that's not my area of expertise, but
Yes,
one of the three business units that you mentioned within Ability Works is inclusive design, consulting, and training,
yes,
specifically working with people with lived experience of living with a disability, but looking at accessibility. And the example I use is that um, um, low low level pavements or low level trams
Yes.
or trains suit a number of different individuals, whether that be people who have prams and are pushing
Yes.
prams, people with walkers, people in wheelchairs, etc. So that team of people at Ability Works actually help organizations understand the full range of accessibility needs. I understand my accessibility needs, but I don't necessarily understand everybody's. So I think it's important that organizations continue to be more curious about what accessibility is
Mm.
and try and demystify the unconscious bias around accessibility, which can be, well, we just need to have nicer music, or we need to make sure there's no slips, trips, and falls around the office. It's so much more, but it doesn't have to be so much more that it's daunting.
No.
It can be based on a number of different parameters that, again, I don't have the necessarily the experience to talk to those pillars or those
Sure.
parameters, given I'm only relatively new into Ability Works.
Yeah.
But there is a framework that we use that I know the team use to test those and to make sure that the organizations that we consult into understand what is required from the breadth of accessibility requirements.
That's insightful with what you are able to share. And what jumps out at me is I think the point about the tram that's lower reminds me of what was known as the curb cut effect,
That's
where
that's it.
in the US, I remember it was a concept that had come out that when the curb had been cut to allow people with
Yeah,
wheelchairs to get up onto the curb,
that's
it
it.
was then also very beneficial for people with prams, or elderly people,
First,
you know, a
yeah,
whole
movement
range of,
slips and all.
yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah. And I think the value of this for organisations to consider is that if they do make these modifications and take the time to carefully consider accessibility for one group,
Mm.
people with disabilities, in fact, they're possibly enabling many other people at the same time. So it's a very worthwhile exercise to
Mm.
dedicate some time in the business strategy to actually do this.
Exactly right. There's another great example where we recently undertook a streetscape audit for a local shopping strip with a local council,
Yes,
with half a dozen individuals with lived experience.
yes,
And very broadly, one example stood out in that we had assumed that street furniture, whether that be out the front of cafes or fruit and vegetable shops or florists, might provide uh, a barrier to somebody who has got limited mobility. In
yes,
actual fact, what we found was that that provided greater accessibility to the streetscape because the person with limited mobility didn't have to go into the cafe or into the shop to sit at a table, to navigate the doorway, to find a place, etc. They could actually sit outside, weather depending, and enjoy their morning coffee or their lunch or their afternoon tea. So the feedback to the council was we would actually encourage street furniture and to an extent whereby it was provided to provide extra seating, I guess, at the space, but at the time. But I guess the unintended benefit was
yes,
that it actually provides greater accessibility for
yes.
people who are less mobile to be able to shop outside or sit outside. So
So
it was a great
challenging the
example.
assumption.
That is the unconscious bias to say no more
Yeah,
street furniture, it provides
yeah,
a hazard, but in actual fact, it provides a benefit.
yeah,
Um, but asking the people with the lived experience to tell us that, I think
yes.
is huge.
That's very interesting, and something I always like to talk about through what we do in Impact Business School is cultivating a culture of curiosity.
Mm.
So instead of making these assumptions, how do we actually connect in with different people within an organisation to really understand not only the problem space, but also modifying and working with the workplace in order to create a culture, one that is robust and one that people enjoy. You know, that when you talk about the benefit, it's also the quality of life, isn't it?
And I think as well, there's a point there around when I am asked, I can only speak for myself. When I'm
Yeah.
asked a question, I'm more willing to answer truthfully and honestly.
Yes.
Like my example previously in joining the organization, I didn't, not because of the people, but just because of my inbuilt concern. I didn't feel free to offer up that information about not being able to sit in sunlight. But when somebody asked me,
Yes.
then I was much more comfortable because I felt that they were being curious enough that they had an interest, as
Yeah.
opposed to me imposing, as I saw at the time, my agenda on them. They
Yeah.
were asking for their agenda to make sure I felt comfortable.
It's a good point, and I'm curious now, just from your own perspective, what are your thoughts around the best way to approach that? So, if we come back to social enterprise model, which could be a small business, it could be a large organisation, but they are often small businesses. What do you think about surveying staff versus sort of having one-to-one conversations and finding out people's needs, perhaps at onboarding? What approach do you think might be either more effective or um, building relationship with team members? Just curious for your thoughts around that.
It's like what we stand for at Ability Works. It's about providing different things for different people. It's
So
I
not a
might
one
Yeah,
size fits all approach.
I might enjoy a one-on-one. Other people may well prefer an anonymous survey.
Yeah,
It really depends on the individual,
yeah,
uh, and not assuming that everybody likes to provide their feedback in the same way.
yeah,
So just being providing, we would call them pathways to employment in a slightly different context, but we
yeah.
believe that every individual has the right to work. We provide a pathway at Ability Works in Q to come and work directly with us. We provide pathways into open employment for those individuals who want to go and work in the marketplace.
Yes,
And we provide a pathway for individuals with lived experience who want to provide inclusive design consulting work. So it's about choice, and it's about removing barriers that stand between you and your ultimate goal. And particularly within the social enterprise sector and the Y sector, the employment sector, to me, it's about providing options. We all want to be able to, I think, well, again,
yes,
we can just speak from my perspective, but I
sure.
want options. I want to be able to choose not 20 things, but I want to be able to choose two or three things. And I know when we talk with our customized employment teams, we talk about vocational pathways, but we have up to three different vocational pathways, just in case one of them has a dead end for whatever reason. But it's about choice.
And how does the organisation guide people through that process of choosing? Like, is there,
It's consultation. It's human centered. It's trying to
yes,
understand the individual's desires, skills, abilities, what they do, what they did at school, what they do in their free time, what they do at the weekends, what their ambitions are, and you really well you can do that face to face. You can do that online. You can do that electronically in a number of different ways. But trying to understand what the individual wants, it's
yes,
quite different to the standard recruitment process where you say, hey, individual, hey, Patricia, what do you think about these five opportunities?
yeah,
No, no, Patricia, what are the five things that you'd like to pursue? And we'll help you pursue those five things, whether that be forklift driving or barista or
mm,
architecture or medical science and research or parking attendance, whatever that might be, that's our role to help you pursue those pathways as opposed to presenting those five job opportunities to you.
sounds brilliant, and sounds like there's a lot of self-determination through that process,
Very
and
much.
I'm sure a lot of self-discovery as well too.
Mm.
Um, having worked as a coach for 10 years, the intelligence of asking people questions so that they can come to their own conclusion about what it is that they actually want to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a wonderful approach.
Mm.
Mm. So, Rafe, you've moved from the corporate world into social enterprise. What did that journey teach you about the relationship between business and human rights? And what shifted in how you see your work now?
I think my work is more purposeful. But I also look back on my business career as also being purposeful.
Yeah.
At times we can discredit the mainstream business um, world for not being purposeful, but it creates employment. It puts food on the table, roofs over the heads, creates many different opportunities,
Mm.
as do social enterprises, albeit social enterprises provide a bit more social impact for those individuals who face more barriers than the rest. But I don't think it's a black or white example. I
No.
think it's a blend. So what I've learned is to respect both, because everybody by and large is trying their very best
Yeah.
to create an economy and to create a workplace that is both meaningful and productive and allows that self-fulfillment or allows for choice. So I'm not completely puritanical when it comes to
Mm.
social enterprises being vastly different to business.
Yeah.
I think they're a bit different, particularly from a purpose perspective.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that businesses aren't and governments aren't purposeful themselves. It's just what comes first, mission
I
or
think that's, yeah, it's a helpful perspective. I do see a little bit of us versus them mentality within the social enterprise sector, and I don't think that's helpful.
it's not.
And I think relating to what you're saying, it would be perhaps more useful to think of how social enterprise can engage with corporates and partner and leverage the environments that corporates work within and their strengths to support the social enterprise sector and what small
Uh,
business is doing.
yeah, and as let's say superannuation holders, it's important that corporations do well also because we want, reasonable retirement plans, and that comes from our superannuation and funds, and superannuation funds are invested in businesses. So, as I say, it took me a little while. It took me just over 50 years to realize that I'm probably more of a centrist, and that might also be seen as a fence sitter. But I think what I describe myself as a fence as a centrist is I can see both. I can see
Yeah,
both left and right. I can see money and I can see mission. And whilst I don't sit on it and do nothing about it, I
yeah.
can jump into the money side. I can jump into the mission side because I think it's purposeful for us to do all those, and that's the way a community prospers,
Mm.
by just respecting the differences and the multiculturalism, dare I say,
Yeah,
given the current
the
theme
current climate.
the current climate around. It's
Yeah,
not about dare I say, a monoculture of everything should be a social enterprise or
no,
everything should be a business entity. Let's celebrate the difference. Let's be the salad bowl. Let's have the tomato and the onion and the lettuce. Let's not mush it up into some nutritional blend, which I'm sure some
that it
people
needs to
like.
be one way or the
That's
other.
right.
Yeah,
Let's celebrate. I learned at school a number of years ago. It was the salad bowl versus the melting pot. Let's celebrate the salad bowl, celebrate the tomato and the onion and the lettuce, because together they make a delicious combination. But let's not mash them all together and drink them as a smoothie. That's kind of works, nutritionally, but it's not that much fun.
no. I like your moderate approach in this era of a lot of radicalism and extremism. I don't think being a moderate's a bad thing. Yeah. So, Ability Works proves that commercial success and social purpose can reinforce each other. What do you think holds more businesses back from making that connection between the two?
Just awareness.
Yeah.
My whole job is around raising the awareness of not just Ability Works, but other disability enterprises and other social enterprises. I was with Social Traders for 5 years before Ability Works, the certifier of social enterprises, very similar to Social Enterprise Australia doing verification of
Yes.
social enterprises. And the whole job is around advocacy and awareness. And when organizations are made aware, and they come at Ability Works, they come and visit. They are keen to work out how to provide us with more opportunities.
Mm.
And you would have heard it before, I'm sure, it's the hand up opportunity, not the hand out opportunity. Our
For
hands are
people
up saying,
listening, do you want to share a little bit about that for everyone listening?
yeah, so the hand up is saying at Ability Works in particular, we can make this for you, we can pack that for you, we can sort that mail for you, we can redistribute that product for you, we can make you this metal brush, we can do this wire, we can make this, we can pre-assemble this product. Our hands are up saying, we want to do work for you.
Yes.
We don't always have the hand out saying, please give us money, we're doing really great things, we'll invest it wisely. We do
Yes.
get a little bit of hand out, a little bit of philanthropic support and a little bit of grant support, but the whole ethos of disability enterprise and particularly social enterprises, of which we're both, is
Yes.
hand up. We're a commercial organization, we're an enterprise, we have to be good on price,
Yeah.
on quality, on capacity and capability. And we have an extra bonus on the top, the cream on the top of it, which we have a bit more social impact than the mainstream business does. But we can't lead with that. People
No.
won't just buy our goods and services based off the impact. Got to
No.
be the good price, quality, capacity, capability.
And I think that's important to stress is the competitive, that the ability to compete in the market and present a really good solution to market. And there's not a variability in the quality of the product or the service that's being delivered. And yet the benefit and the advantage is that employment of people, as we started the conversation with employment being a fundamental human right.
It's
And I think that's
sustainable.
what we need to come back to, is taking the time to be able to put the modelling in place to support people to have gainful employment, people of all ability. So,
That's exactly.
yeah. Okay, so just lastly, Rafe, for leaders who are inspired to act but don't know where to start when it comes to supporting human rights in business, which is a broad topic, but with your perspective, what's one thing you'd encourage them to do first?
Be inquisitive. When I was in my corporate career and I was coming towards the end of it, and I was in my late 30s, I got inquisitive. I started working out what I needed to do in order to move into a different sector. And I went and volunteered for a day at a school workshop where I helped look after school bags. But also got to witness an incredible facilitated session for 400 year nines. If I hadn't taken up that opportunity to go and do that volunteering day, I wouldn't have spent 10 years in the not-for-profit sector as a volunteer, in which I'm still involved, working with young people who are facing particular barriers. And I wouldn't have ended up in the social enterprise sector, which was my next chapter after the not-for-profit sector. So just be inquisitive, just have a look around. There's plenty of information available online. Just follow your instinct to find out more
Yeah.
about something that you're interested in. And there's lots of people out there to try and help you navigate that.
I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up our conversation. And the thought that comes to mind for me on a pragmatic level is organisations setting aside some time. So to have that inquisition and curiosity, there needs to be time in that busy work week set aside to do some research. I liked what you said about following your instinct. I mean, most of us as founders and within purpose-driven organisations have an area of interest. So why not pursue something that's of interest within that? Because that will lead you, that passion will lead you to something.
And
Yeah,
don't be afraid, don't be afraid to do the most trivial of tasks. It wasn't professional volunteering, it wasn't helping develop
no,
sales team, it was emptying rubbish bins and it was looking after school bags. And that kind of gave me a flip in my career. So if you need to flip the burgers at the sausage sizzle, go and flip the burgers at the
yes,
sausage sizzle, because it
yeah,
might lead to a different conversation that you might
yes.
not otherwise have had.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Rafe. It's been such an insightful conversation, and there's a lot of takeaways there that I think will be useful to people who are considering how to embed human rights within business. Um, where can people learn more about Ability Works Australia?
Online, abilityworks.com.au. There's plenty of information. There's a contact us button. Pick up the phone. We're always available to talk to people who are interested in learning more. We want to raise awareness, and we're doing a number of programs to do that. But just get in touch. More than happy to field those calls and help point anybody in the right direction.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Rafe. It's been a pleasure to chat today.
No problems. Thanks, Patricia.